evening. I hope that you're here and that everybody can hear me. If anybody is on the line and just wants to let me know that you can in fact hear me, I assume that you can. It's just, you could text me or at 917-566-2261 just to make sure that the system is working. Okay, all right. Now the topic for tonight is 5 levels of pleasure and how to distinguish between real and counterfeit pleasures. Now, the reality is that we're actually at a time now where most of us are at home. You know, it's an unusual time period, but we're at home. And it's an interesting thing that, you know, I could have memories as a young child. Somebody printing here. Okay, forgive me for the printing here, but I think that's my wife printing. There we go. Okay. All right, we'll leave it for the moment. Okay, so I have memories as a child coming back home. And you may have memories when you remember you were away on a vacation and you came home, and there's a wonderful feeling of, I'm coming back home. What is that feeling? It's a feeling of coming back to yourself, in a way, to who you really are. That's what it's about. And I think that when we're at home now, there's a feeling that we have of it's a time to get in touch with who we really are. That's what it's about, you know. And I think we need to ask that question, that we're at home. What are our values? What are the things that we really want? You know, that's really, you know, something for us to think about. And in the context of this class, I think that what we have to think about is what are the things that we want? Are those things that we want, are they good for us? Are they our pleasures? Are they pleasures that we feel will be healthy for us? Or are they things that are enticing in the world out there, which we feel that we want, we identify them as pleasures, but somehow maybe we feel guilty about it, somehow maybe we feel they're not really so good for us. And so this class is to try to help us come to terms with all of this. What is it that really is good for us? What is really a real pleasure? What's something that's not good for us? What's a little bit of a counterfeit pleasure? But that's really what we're coming to deal with in this class. I want to just sort of clarify that the first thing that we need to really understand is that there are real pleasures in life and there are counterfeit pleasures. And those things often look very similar, right? Now, the real pleasure will give you something, wow, it'll be real, and you'll make you feel very good. But there's also going to be things that they look very similar, but they are counterfeit, just like counterfeit money. And it doesn't yield what it promises. So imagine the following scenario, that, you know, someone comes and he drops on your front doorstep $100,000. Imagine that. You can't believe it. It's a gift. Here it is. So what do? You go to Tiffany's, you buy a couple of watches, you still have $90,000 left. You're feeling on top of the world. The only problem is you leave Tiffany's and there's a couple of policemen right there waiting for you, because when you paid with counterfeit money. So even though you felt really good, the policemen, they take you away, they slap you in prison. So you really are much worse off than when you started. You thought that this would be good for you, but the reality is it wasn't. It didn't yield what it promised. And therefore what happened? You ended up not just not getting the real pleasure, worse than you were before, right? And this is it. This is a key to life, to understand there are things out there that glitter and they look like they're real, but really they're not real. And not only they're not real, but they're going to give us, and we're going to end up being worse off than we were in the first place. Now, as we go through the different levels of pleasure, we're going to see that for every level of pleasure, there's a real pleasure and there's a counterfeit pleasure. But let's just for a moment stop on this point, which is pleasure. You know, it's a very interesting thing. You know, what's it got to do with Judaism? You know, isn't Judaism about doing what God wants? It's doing his will. But we're talking here today about pleasure, and even that, you know, it's like, you know, are we really supposed to be, you know, indulging in pleasure? Is that such a religious thing to do? So let's tackle this head on. right? So you see, let's say you would say to somebody who's not familiar with Judaism, maybe a Jewish person that's less affiliated or more secular, and you say to him, tell me something. What do you think Judaism says is what God really wants from us? What is it? What does he really want from us? So I think, if you might get answers like this, that I think he wants us to be good. He wants us to serve him. He wants us to make the world a better place. He wants us to pray, to be better people. And all those answers are very nice answers, and they all have aspects of truth. But, here's a way you can say to that person, you know what, this is actually a way to understand it from the Torah point of view. You see, the relationship with God to us is like the relationship of a parent to a child. Does that make sense? And they'll say, yeah, it makes sense. So you say, well, you know what? If it's true that our relationship to God is like a parent to a child, if you can understand what is it that parents, bottom line, want for their children, then you'll be able to understand what is it that God wants from us. Does that make sense? And they'll say, yeah, that makes sense. So then you will say, you know what? Tell me, what is it, if they're a parent, what is it that you want for your children? Or if they're a child, what is it that your parents really bottom line want for you? And I think they might say, yes, I want my children to be healthy and to have good things in life. But the bottom line, what parents want for their children, they want their children to be happy. That's it. Yes. And all the other things are different aspects of how to be happy. That's really what it is, right? So that's it. So if we understand that that's what parents want for their children, so Judaism says that that is really what the Almighty, what Hashem wants for us. He wants us to really be happy, to have all the pleasures in life. And it's not just that we, in the world to come, right? And that we suffer in this world for the world to come. We don't believe in that. That's the other religion. We believe get tremendous pleasure in this world, right? So that you'll get even more pleasure in the world to come. But our God wants us to have tremendous pleasure in this world, and that's what we believe, right? So just like a parent wants that for his or her children, God wants that for us. And it makes sense, because if you understand that the Jewish concept of God is that God's an infinite being, and therefore he's lacking nothing. So there's nothing that you can do for God. It's not that if you pray to God, like we said last week, you pray to God and he says, yippee, that's me, he does a little jig and he doesn't, someone told me that I'm great and I'm mighty and I'm then give me a few holies and I'll really feel good. No, Hashem is an infinite being. He's lacking nothing. It's not that when we serve God, he gets something from it, so to speak. It's because he's an infinite being, as the Navi says, as the prophet says, Ma titain lo. What are you going to give to the Almighty? You're going to give him something. He's perfect. So when we serve God, it's not because he needs it. It's because we need it. It's for us. It's not for him. He does unchanging. It's for us. It's for us to grow, right? It's for our pleasure. And therefore, that's the Jewish concept of God, that God created us in this world to give us all the pleasures in life. And it makes sense. That's why Hashem gave us a Torah, because what's the Torah literally? Torat Chaim, an instruction manual for living, how to get the most pleasure out of life. 248 positive instructions of what to do, 365 negative instructions of what to avoid, so that you can become the person, can be the fullest human being, right? So you can have the most pleasure out of life, right? That is what the Almighty wants for us, right? And that's, again, as a parent for our children. You see, we might want pleasures for our children. Imagine you want your children, what do you want your children? You want them to have good food, right? You want them to enjoy a little music. You want them to maybe go and do a little sport and play tennis. And that's all very nice. But as they grow older, and let's say 30, 40 years old, or even before, you want them to settle down, to get married, to have a job, because you know that to accomplish in life, because you realize that that's part of what having real pleasure in life is. And if you understood there was more pleasures out there, you'd want them for your children as well, right? If your children didn't really, is 50 years old and he's not really thinking about getting married, you'd be a little disappointed and frustrated. If he's not really accomplished in life and he's just playing tennis the whole time without, you'd feel like, yeah, it's nice, but I want you to have a little bit more in life. I want you to feel a sense of accomplishment. I want you to feel a sense of family. I want you to have more. So that's our understanding. In this, we have to be very clear and realize this is what the Almighty wants for us. This is what Hashem wants for us. We're his children. He wants us to have all the pleasures in the world, and he gave us an instruction manual of how to get there. Now, this class is dealing with 5 different categories of pleasure, right? And this is something that my teacher, Rabbi Weinberg, of blessed memory, he learned it out from a book called the Sefer HaChinuch. In this book, it mentions in the mitzvah of love of God 5 different levels of pleasure, and we're going to try to go through each of these pleasures. So we're going to start with the lowest level pleasure. What is the lowest level pleasure? The lowest level pleasure, what do you think? What do you think it would be? And the answer is physical pleasure. Physical and material pleasures. This is the 5th level pleasure, right? So we have to start off with what is the Jewish attitude to physical pleasure? Now let's understand it by seeing what it's not. So out there in the world, there's such a thing as asceticism. What's asceticism? It's an attitude towards physical pleasure, which is really taken on by many of the Eastern religions or other religions, for example, and the philosophy goes like this: if the goal in life is to be spiritual, and that's really where the pleasure is to be had, that's what our life is about, then wouldn't it make sense to stay away from the physical? I want spiritual, I stay away from physical. Right? Kind of makes sense, or you would think it does. You'll see in a moment that we don't agree with this. But therefore, you might have those people whose attitude towards physicality is stay away from it. So you you go onto a mountain and you fast, or you stay away from physical things and become a priest, and you don't have any kind of physical connections and so forth, because it's bad, right? It's bad. It's going to take me away. It's maybe luring me away from the real pleasures of spirituality in life. I stay away from it. That's one. That's called asceticism. Now let's take another attitude to physicality, which is prevalent in Western society, and we're surrounded by this, which is, listen, let's be honest. You ever had a nice big burger, a nice juicy steak? Doesn't that taste good? So tell me something. You know it does, right? So 1 steak is good. How about 5 or 10? That's going to be even better, right? So this is what we call hedonism, right? Hedonism is involvement in physicality, physical pleasures, just have more and more, because if 1 steak is good, 5 or 10, let's be honest, is going to be a party, right? That's fantastic. So if you want more pleasure in life and have more and more physical pleasure, that's just great. So what's the Jewish approach, right? What's the Torah approach? The Torah approach is we don't believe that the physical world is bad. In fact, we believe it's good. So much so that the Talmud says that when we get to the next world, everybody until 120, the Almighty is going to ask you, was there a fruit that you could have had, that you saw, it was on your plate, or you saw it and you could have had it and you never had it, you didn't try it? That Hashem is going to judge you for that. You know what? I created this beautiful fruit for your pleasure and you didn't try it. I wanted you to have that physical pleasure and you didn't. So there's a judgment. Amazing, amazing piece of the Talmud. So what we say, so how do we understand it? You see, the physical world is good, right? It's there for our pleasure. But there's a very important principle you need to understand in having physical pleasure, and that's the following. The following is that physical pleasure, or being involved in the physicality, is only enjoyable when you use it as a means to an end. So a person eats food right? So that he can have energy, right? But if he's eating food to indulge, it doesn't give the pleasure. It's when you have enough food that it gives you energy, it'll give you pleasure. You go to sleep, right? Not because you want to sleep your life away, right? But you go to sleep so that you're re-energized for the following day, right? That then you feel good about your sleep, right? Once you indulge, you know what happens? You get a stomach ache, right? You feel bad, you know, you don't feel good. So this is the point of understanding. We believe in physical pleasure. Enjoy it. Say a blessing on the food, right? Enjoy the physical pleasures that you have, right? But only to the extent that there are means to something higher. There are means to an end, something more meaningful, right? When you're using physicality as a means to something higher, then when you have your dinner, you'll enjoy it. The minute that it starts becoming an end to itself, then you lose the pleasure. So it's not that we don't believe in having lots of steaks because we don't believe in that kind of enough physical pleasure. What we believe is have too much, you'll start feeling indulgent, you'll start feeling empty and sick to the stomach, and it robs you of pleasure. Right? So therefore, use physicality. So therefore here, the attitude to physicality is be involved in it, enjoy it, learn how to appreciate it, you know, become a connoisseur, right? Enjoy the steak and the apple and the orange. It's so beautiful. Enjoy the succulent orange and all the different foods. Enjoy it. And that's why we say a blessing on it, right? It's meant to enjoy it and say thank God for it, right? So that's the real pleasure. The counterfeit is indulgence. As soon as you indulge, you lose the pleasure. Now, this is one aspect of physical pleasure. What we're saying is the material pleasures, learn to enjoy them and don't indulge in them. But there's another part. Now, as an introduction to this second part of the fifth level pleasure, which is the physical pleasure, I want to share a story with you, which is going to help us through the different levels of pleasure, which is the following. And it's a beautiful story of someone that went into Rabbi Weinberg's office and said to him, Rabbi Weinberg, you know, was traveling through Israel. And he said, Rabbi, I want to tell you something. I've been through the whole country, north, south, east, west. And I want to tell you something. There's nothing spiritual about this, you know, there's nothing holy about this country. You know, I've been everywhere. I traveled all around it and, you know, nothing holy about this land. So he's sitting there and Rabbi Weinberg asked him the following question. Tell me something. On your travels, how many befuf sticks did you see? He says, how many what? He says, how many befuf sticks did you see? He says, what's a befuf stick? Rabbi Weinberg says, no. I'm asking the questions here. You tell me how many befuf sticks you saw. The guy starts getting a little bit frustrated. He said, well, Rabbi, how can I tell you how many befuf sticks I saw if you don't tell me what a befuf stick is? So Rabbi Weinberg looks and says, aha, tell me something. You have a definition of holiness that you know what it is. Maybe, you know, you think it's like, you know, a rainbow appearing in the sky, you know, God's going to tap you on the shoulder, an angel appears in front of you. If that's what you thought it was, it's possible, right? That, you know what? It was right in front of your nose and you didn't even know it because you didn't have a definition, right? If you had a definition of holiness, right, then maybe you could tell me that you didn't see it. But if you don't have a definition, don't know what you're talking about, it could have been right there and you missed the whole thing. So Rabbi Weinberg would use this analogy to say, you know what, in life, important things that we want and that we need, right, we're often very hazy about, right? So for example, you know, if you want to be happy, you know, if you want to have a relationship based on love, right? So what does it mean to be happy? You know, people can spend their whole life chasing something. They think if they work their way up the corporate ladder and then, you know, then I'll be happy, you know, or if I meet the right gal, then I'll be happy. Or if I have the you know, children, then I'll be happy. Or buy the new house or whatever it is, yeah. People often can spend many, many years of life chasing something that they think will give them happiness, but because they didn't have a definition, they wasted years of their life chasing something that in the end is not even going to give them what they want. Better define what it is to have happiness. Define what it is to have a loving relationship. And then you can go and get it. But if you don't, you can get it confused with something that may seem like it, right? But isn't the real thing. So therefore, we want to start here when we're talking about the fifth level of pleasure, that we talked about physical, material pleasures, right? And so what we wanted to say is really bring out how happiness is really part of this fifth level. Now, really, we talked about this a little bit when we spoke about the prayer class on the first prayer class and understanding your relationship with Hashem. But I think it's such an important principle. I want to bring it out again, and it fits here in the fifth level of pleasure, which is the following. You see, what is the definition of happiness, right? What does it mean to be happy? So you see, let's bring it out this way. If I offered anybody here, $1,000 for their eyes, right? Would you take it? And you give me your eyes, I give you no takers. 100,000, $1 million. $1 million is a lot of money, give me your eyes, you walk away a millionaire. No, 10 million, 100 million, Rabbi, it doesn't matter how much money you give me, I'm not giving you my eyes, right? Okay, Now, now imagine I met you and I was a very wealthy fella, right? In many ways, Baruch Hashem, you'll see by the end of this little piece, I am. But if I came to you and I said, you know what, I like you. You're a friend of mine. I appreciate you. I pick up my attaché case. Say, here's a gift to you. You open up wads of $100 bills. It's $1 million. I say, it's yours, a gift from me to you because I like you so much. And it's really a sincere gift. How would you feel? You know how you'd feel? You'd feel like $1 million, right? You do a jig down the street, you'd be so happy. But if I say to you, my friend, you have eyes, how do you feel? You look at me and think I'm crazy. Say the same miserable person as I was before you asked me the question. But I come back and say, listen, you told me that your eyes are worth more to you than any money. Right? So if your eyes are worth more to you than any money, right? If you do a jig down the street for the $1 million that I gave you, shouldn't you be doing a jig down the street because you have eyes? It's worth more to you than any money, more than $1 million, more than 10 million, more than any money. Say, right, good question, Rabbi. So what's the answer? The answer is, we got used to our eyes. That's it. We take our eyes for granted. See, and that is the problem that we have with being happy. See, if you get used to your eyes, you can get used to anything, right? You get a new car, you get a new Lamborghini that you get for your birthday, you get whatever it is, come back in a few months, in a year, you'll be used to that as well because you got used to your eyes, you get used to the new house, the new baby, the new wife, the new whatever it is, you get used to it. So what's the trick, right? See, the trick is to learn to appreciate what you have, not to take it for granted. And that's why in Judaism we say 100 blessings a day so that we can exercise that muscle, right, of appreciating what we have. Right? And this is appreciating the physical things that we have. If you just appreciate all the physical things that you have eyes, you have ears, you have a heart, you have hands, you have more than 50 things that are worth more to you than any money, right? So that's amazing. So therefore, each one of us has to appreciate we're a walking multi-billionaire. Even if we don't have a penny to our name, we're all rich, right? Now, if we can do that, right, and appreciate what we have, we would be so happy. But it's just hard work because it's so much easier to go through life and focus on everything you don't have. See, what's the definition of happiness? Happiness is the pleasure that you have when you appreciate what you truly have. What's misery? I'll tell you how to be miserable. Focus on everything that you don't have. Focus on everything that goes wrong today. This guy wasn't sensitive, and this guy didn't do this, and I woke up and I just didn't feel good, and everything. Focus on what you don't have, and what went wrong. Guarantee you'll be. That's the definition of misery, right? Focus on the pleasure. Focus on what you do have, right? Focus on all the things that you do have. you'll skip through life. You'll be ecstatic, right? It's just hard work. We've got to exercise that muscle. So this is just physical pleasure. See, if you appreciate all these physical things, right, then that within it will give you a feeling of happiness. So this is the first level. You see, the physical and material pleasures are enjoy the physicality, yeah, don't indulge in it, but use it for a higher purpose. And the counterfeit of that is to indulge in physical things. You think it's going to be give you pleasure, but it's not. You're going to be indulged, and you'll feel sick. You get a stomach ache, right? A. And B, real happiness, material pleasure gives you the feeling of happiness and of energy, right? If you appreciate all the things that you have, then you feel happy. What's the counterfeit of this part of the fifth level? Is that it's, if I amass wealth, right? I say there's nothing wrong with being wealthy. You can do a lot of good things with money. But if you're looking at that's what's going to make you happy, it's that feeling I want more, you'll just get greedy. I want more and more and more. Yeah, it's not, because you'll get the more, and if you haven't learned how to appreciate what you have, then you still won't be happy, right? So that's the illusion, that by amassing material and physical things and nice things, somehow I'll magically become happy. Unfortunately, many people have many, many nice things out there, and they are miserable because they never learn how to appreciate what they have. So this is the fifth level pleasure. Fifth level pleasure is appreciating physical and material things, not indulging and not amassing. That's the counterfeit. Okay, so now let's go on to the fourth level of pleasure, right? Now, what's the fourth level of pleasure? We have to understand, you see, each of these different levels of pleasure are not, each one is a categorically different type of pleasure. It's something much greater than the level before. In fact, they're not interchangeable, meaning there's no amount of fifth level physical pleasure that will give you the pleasures of the next level. So what would be the next level? That's physical. So what's the next level? You'd think emotional, right? But this level of pleasure is really what all the songs are about. This is what people sing about. It's something, people sing about being happy, maybe, but much more out there, they're singing about the fourth level of pleasure, which is the pleasure of love, right? So again, we want to have a definition, a clear definition, because we understand that, when you are, there's a thing out there called infatuation, right? Now, I don't know if you've ever felt that, you're aware of that feeling, but it's what's in all the movies, right? A feeling of infatuation resembles the feeling of being in love, right? So, we often feel that when, a person needs to know the difference between the two, because a person, for example, you can, once you get married because you love the person, not because you're infatuated. So what's the difference? What's the difference? So let's try to understand. You see, what is love? So let me imagine the following scenario. Let's say you would have asked my mother, Aleha Shalom, right? You say, tell me something about your son. Tell me what he's like. So you could have imagined her saying, my son, he's warm, and he's caring, and he's responsible, and he's intelligent, and I just love him, right? Now, why? Why is she saying at the end, and I just love it? Because, right, when you see the virtues of a human being, and you identify the person with his or her virtues, that's when you feel a sense of love. He is so caring. He is so giving. He is so warm and responsible. When you see the virtues and you say that's who he or she is, then you feel a sense of love. What's hate? Hate is the opposite, right? That guy, he thinks he's God's gift to mankind. He thinks he owns the place. He's so arrogant and egotistical. I can't stand him. What does that mean? See his faults, right? Identify with him, with his faults, and you'll hate him. That's how to hate someone. Now let's go back to infatuation. What is infatuation, right? What is it that you feel when you're infatuated? So imagine again the scenario. A gal comes back after meeting a guy, and she said, "Oh, I met the guy of my dreams. he's so incredible, he's so giving, and he's kind and he's caring, and he's perfect, right? So that seems a little bit like love. Why? Because we said love was focusing on the virtues. And here she's seeing someone and she's focusing on what she thinks are virtues. So why isn't that love? So the difference is like this. You see, if you think a person is perfect, it's not real. You just met the guy. You don't even know the guy, right? So therefore, it's not real. You're not really seeing the virtues. You want to believe that those are the virtues that he or she has, right? And therefore, it's not real. So how do you know the difference? If you think he or she is perfect, you're infatuated because you're not seeing the real thing. You're blind to the reality, right, of who he or she is. And unfortunately, in the world out there, where people can get married and they're infatuated with each other, what happens is a year, 2 years down the line, and the infatuation fades, they see who the person really is and say, oh, I didn't want this, right? This is not who I thought I married, right? But really, you never knew them in the first place. You were just infatuated. You see, that there's a saying out there that love is blind, right? We don't believe that. We say infatuation is blind. If you think you met the perfect gal, run a million miles, because there's no such thing as anyone who's perfect. You're infatuated and not in love. So you see, the thing is like this. If you say, to someone, who loves you the most? Most people will say, who loves me? My parents. Who loves us the most? Our parents, maybe our spouses, right? Who loves us the most, right? Who gives us the most criticism? Our parents, right? So how does that work? You love your children the most. Means that, according to what we said, that you're seeing their virtues, right? So therefore, what does it mean that if I'm giving them criticism, it means I'm focusing on their faults? So this is the point, and this is the crucial point of understanding how to love someone, is that when you love someone, you know them. Like the Rambam says, according to the knowledge is the love, right? When you know someone, you see the good and the bad together, right? But what's the difference, right? You see the love, you see the good, and the bad, but you identify the person with his or her virtues, not with his faults. So, for example, if you go back to my mother and say, that was really nice what you said about your son, right? But isn't it true that your son is really also a hypochondriac, megalomaniac, kleptomaniac? Isn't that also true? Outside of all the beautiful virtues you said? And she'll say, yeah, well, one, it happens to be that he does have those negative qualities a little bit, but then she'll say, but it's not really his fault. He really grew up that way. It was really my fault. He's struggling against it. You see, when you love someone, you see the faults, but you don't say that's who they are. You understand this is something which is not, it's not the essence of who they are, right? It's something that they're struggling. We all have faults, right? And we all are struggling with them. Now imagine the following scenario. Let's say you see a person and he's walking down the street, and you notice that doesn't have an arm, right? Now, I think that when we see people like that, and I know people like that who are wonderful, wonderful people, right? But at the same time, I think we get a little bit of a jolt, right? You see a person who's walking and he's got one leg, oh, he's not walking, but he's whatever, he's moving and he has one leg, it hurts us, right? It hurts us because we feel badly, right? Now imagine if I would be walking down the street with you and we see such a person, and I would say to you, don't you hate that person because he has one leg? The person would say to me, Rabbi Sampson, I can't believe I'm hearing that from you. How can you hate someone because they have one leg? They can't help it. This is, it's just a problem that they have. Don't hate someone because they've got a problem. So I ask you, my friends, a person walks down the street with a big ego, goes through life with a big ego. What's worse, to go through life with a big ego, or to be a very humble person and have one leg or one arm, right? I'm telling you now, much worse to go through life. You should have all the blessings, but to go through life with a big ego, you're going to have problems with your spouse, with your boss, with your children. You're going to have problems being happy. You're going to have problems learning from people. A big ego is a terrible thing to go through life with. Much bigger problem than what we just described. So imagine if we're walking down the street and we see somebody who has and we're walking down the street, so you see, oh, this guy's got a big ego. And I say, I hate him because he's got a big ego. You say, that's even worse than hating someone who doesn't have a hand or doesn't have whatever it is. Why? Because it's a bigger problem, right? Don't hate people because of their faults, right? Feel bad for them. Feel compassion, right? Don't be judgmental. The essence of how to get this feeling of ahava, of love, is to realize, to see that this person has beautiful virtues and he's struggling against his or her faults. I remember one time when I was in yeshiva many years ago, and there was a guy that I remember every time he would walk in the room and you'd feel that little feeling of, I feel I don't really like this guy, you feel that feeling. So I remember, one time he came to me, this person that I had that feeling, and it was one Elul just before Rosh Hashanah. He came up to me and said, Chaim, I want to ask you for advice. Don't know why he came to me at the time, but he did. And he said, I've been struggling with, I have this issue and I have a big ego and I don't know what to do about it and I'm struggling with it. And I thought you'd give me some advice. I'm trying to do tshuva before Rosh Hashanah. What do you think I can do? And I wanted to tell you, I was humbled, right? Because I had looked at this guy. This is who he is. He is egocentric. That's the essence of who he is. And now I saw how much he was trapped in it. It wasn't who he is. He's held back by it, right? So therefore, right, it's not the essence. Then I saw him after that as a soul, as a neshama, as a person who's virtuous and a wonderful person, but just struggling with, he has his faults, I have mine. The mitzvah of ahavta l'reach kamocha, to love your neighbor as yourself, is to love even obnoxious people, right? Because everybody has faults, right? Which just come in different shapes and sizes and different stripes and colors, right? You have yours. Don't hate him. See the beautiful virtues that he has and understand that he has his pekelach, you have yours. So this is, the second, this is so the pleasure of fourth level is pleasure of love. What's the definition of love? The definition of love is the pleasure you feel when you identify a person with his or her virtues. And the counterfeit is infatuation. Infatuation is you think that you're in love, you feel, but you actually don't see the person's virtues clearly. It's just an illusion because you kind of want to believe it, right? But you don't really know the person. If you know them, you see the good and the bad together. That's when you really love someone, as long as you identify them with the good and not with the bad. If you hate them, it's because you identify, or you dislike them even, it's because you're looking at the bad and seeing that's the essence of who they are on some level. So stop judging people and see the beauty in people and realize that we all have our faults. So that's the fourth level pleasure. Now, what we're going to do before we get into the third level pleasure, we have to really basically understand that the following piece, right, which is that in order to really to get to the higher level pleasures, and this really sorts out, as we say, the men from the boys, right, the women from the girls, right, no discrimination here, which is that you've got to understand the following important piece of wisdom if you really want to even get into what we call the heavier pleasures of life, right? So I want to share this point. You see, and my teacher, Rabbi Weinberg, used to ask it the following way. You see, if you ask someone, what is the opposite of pain? What are they going to say? Or what are you going to say? The opposite of pain is pleasure. Now, my teacher, Rabbi Weinberg, used to say the opposite of pain is pleasure is the definition of decadence. Now, why so? Why would that be, right? Because, if you think the opposite of pain is pleasure, right? So if I want pleasure, I've got to stay away from pain because they're opposites. So what is the feeling of no pain, right? The feeling of no pain is really comfort. It's comfort. So if you really think the opposite of pain is pleasure, then I want to stay away from pain. What I've been looking for in life, which I think is going to give me pleasure, is comfort. Now, what's the ultimate comfort? What does that mean I'm looking for in life? So imagine the following scenario. You're lying on a beach. It's a beautiful day, right? The sun is coming down. You're lying there and, you know, you're so comfortable, and it's really a comfortable experience. You have a little nice glass by the side. You've got your little pina colada there. It's really, but you're lying there. You're not moving a muscle. You're not even blinking your eyes. You're just so comfortable. You just got to be careful you don't fall asleep and miss the whole experience, right? You're doing nothing, right? That's the ultimate pleasure. That if you identify the opposite of pain is pleasure, that's what you're going to be looking for. Now, Judaism says actually they're total opposites, right? That if you want pleasure, pain is the price you pay for pleasure. As it says in Pirkei Avot, Lefum Sarah Agra, according to the effort is the reward. But it's a very important principle in pleasure in life, right? That according to the effort that you put in is the pleasure that you'll get out, right? And we know this to be true. So for example, I don't know, you know, you play sport, right? You play tennis, you know, imagine you play tennis, you love to play tennis. Now what do you enjoy more? A really tough game, and it's a 5-set game, 2 sets all, tiebreaker in the fifth set, and it's so close. And it was such a hard game, so much effort. But in the end, you won 24-22 in the fifth tiebreaker, and you won the game, right? Or would you prefer a game where it was like, you know, the guy gets on the pitch, is that right? No, I'm getting becoming an American. The court, excuse me, Wimbledon, I should know. You get on the court, and it's 6-love, 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 or so, excuse me, 6-0, 6-0, 6-0, right? So you know, and you won, but there was no game. It was too easy. Which is a greater pleasure, the easy one or the hard one? Of course, the hard one, right? In life, you know, a person wants to climb a mountain. Right? There's something about it. It's hard. Imagine it was a little mountain, yet it's a 6-foot mountain. There's no point in that. You know, we convince you it's a mountain. It doesn't give you the pleasure. If you take a helicopter to the top of the mountain and you flew up there, it doesn't give you the pleasure. According to in life, we understand that the more effort you put in all the background music there. I'm not sure what happened there. The more effort you put in, the more pleasure you'll get out of life. It's your relationships, it's your work, it's whatever you do. What Judaism says, right, is that that's true for all of life. The more effort you put in, the more you'll get out. And that's crucial. Now, we have to understand that before we get into the third level pleasure, which we're running out of time. And we hear the noise. It sounds like it's coming from Yerushalayim, but okay. But we got to understand that you've got to get this into your bones, because we're looking in life for comfort and we're mistaking that as pleasure. And as long as we're doing that, we're going to lose. We're going to go through life and basically choose not to put the effort in, not to put the effort in, not to put the effort in, and we will not get the tremendous pleasures that we can get. So I guess we'll have to pick up from here next time. Arab noise in the background here, which I'm not sure what's going on, where it's coming from, but the reality is that we're out of time anyway. So next time we'll have to got to do the top 3 levels of pleasure. But if you understand physical pleasure, pleasures of love, it's physical pleasure, and it's use it for a higher pleasure, don't indulge in it and appreciate what you have. Love, focus on people's virtues and identify them in their virtues. And and get to know them, understand them, and understand their faults is not their essence. And number 3 is understand that real pleasures come from putting tremendous effort into life. You're going to jump out of bed, wake the day, give it all. You need to be prepared to do that in order to get the higher level pleasures. I thank you for listening, and we'll pick it up next time. Have a very good night. And all